Marcia, you're one of the world experts in thyroid cancer. Can you just give us an overview of what is the kind of current landscape of treating kind of radioactive iodine refractory metastatic thyroid cancer?
So radioactive iodine refractory cancer is just really started to be treated in the last, say, 10 years. And we've had the FDA approval of 2 agents, sorafenib and lenvatinib. Both of them are active. Both of them produce responses and really prolonged progression-free survival. They're not easy always to take, and we have to manage side effects, but they really have turned it around for many patients who would have otherwise had nothing.
Okay. And when you look at that space right now, what are some of the unmet needs?
I think that the main unmet need is, as wonderful as these 2 drugs are, they don't last forever. And so number one, the unmet need is there's still a need. Now you have a lot of patients who are surviving longer, and when they start to get progression, they actually have very good progression. They usually have very good performance status, yeah. And they really are candidates for additional therapies.
Okay. And just going back to, the overall, I mean, thyroid is one of the fastest growing cancer prevalence-wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many patients would you say a year are affected, have kind of radioactive iodine refractory metastatic thyroid?
You know, that's a really good question because we don't really have numbers to say how many, because the vast majority of patients will actually be cured of their disease. And much of the growth of the incidence over the last few years has been in the small early detection of disease that's usually going to be cured. I would say we're probably between 6,000, less than 10,000 patients newly diagnosed a year who end up with RAI-refractory disease.
And then, so given the data that, you know, all these studies, both larotrectinib and entrectinib have shown, and a good number of these patients have been thyroid cancer patients, where do you see kind of the, where do these, I guess, these treatments fit in that context?
So that's a good question, because you could say, now that we have these drugs that have very low toxicity, we always have I would argue in all of cancer we have an unmet need for therapies that don't cause side effects or are very, very tolerable. So on one level we would say there's an unmet need always for something after the FDA approved drugs where we're actually treating people. And so getting testing for those people, once they're even on any systemic therapy, I'm getting everybody tested. And it's not actually just for do they have tract fusions, because now we have very exciting drugs coming out, and they're actually RET fusions as well in RAI-refractory. And there are also BRAF mutations, and there's very good phase 2 data for both dabrafenib and bemorafenib. So we're wanting to get testing now earlier, because often we want to know at the beginning, what are our choices? Yeah. And we might sequence these different options based on sometimes on the tolerability of them, rather than just on how long they last. But in general, we use the FDA approved as first line and second line. That might start to change, because if the side effect profile of these new drugs is much lower, or the toxicity is much lower, they might start to creep in and many people are starting to think maybe we could try them earlier on.
When do you actually start testing, whether it's NGS or anything else, mutations, et cetera, for these patients? Is it even earlier than when you treat them with radioactive iodine, when you first get the tissue?
So interestingly, there's 2 phases of a thyroid cancer patient. So when they're first getting their nodules worked up, sometimes they will have had some sort of a panel done at that time. So many times by the time they come later, we might at least know the BRAF status. And so once a patient, in my opinion, is starting to progress, they have RAI-refractory disease, I know they're going to need systemic therapy, I want to know then what are their choices. If they have a BRAF mutation, then I may not be ordering NGS testing on them right away, because I know that for the most part we're not going to probably find a lot else, because they tend to be mutually exclusive. However, in all patients who are BRAF negative, I definitely will be ordering it, because I want to know what are our options for sequencing purposes.
Right.